My name's Kevin Dorr. I'm a software engineer for Alfresco in the United States. I work with the channel partners there, including this gentleman right here. This session is going to be about dynamic user interface generation with the new Aikau framework that we've got built into Share. So what we're going to go over today is what is Aikau. How many people have seen an Aikau session before or have used Aikau? Great, wow. The turnout here is really quite overwhelming. So we'll talk a little bit about why you might use Aikau, where the code is, and then I'll go over a fairly detailed example of how to use it. So first of all, I thought I'd tell you an interesting story though, because I wasn't really too sure where we got the name from. I didn't really believe this was a marketing generated name since it's kind of a odd name. And so I did a little research into it while I was doing this presentation. So as you know, we wrote the surf framework and we've had that out for some amount of time. And Eddie Aikau was a surfer that was very famous in Hawaii. And it turns out he's a pretty interesting guy. He was one of the very first natives that learned to surfboard and was really big in the promotion of Hawaii as a destination for surfers. And surfing in Hawaii at the time in the 60s was actually very dangerous. A lot of people drowned, and it was, you know, pretty bad to if you got in trouble. So he became the first lifeguard actually in Waimea Bay, and is credited with saving over 300 people's lives. Then in 1978 he decided to go on a trip that some people were putting together to honor native Hawaiians, and they built a catamaran and they were going to sail from Hawaii to the Polynesian Islands. So they got off the coast of Hawaii and got into a storm, and the boat started to sink and capsized, and they were in quite a bit of trouble. So he decided to take his surfboard and try to paddle back for help, and as he was paddling, his life jacket started to get in his way, so he took his life jacket off and tried to actually swim back to Hawaii to get the people some help. But what happened was a Coast Guard cutter came by and saved all the people that were with the catamaran, and Eddie Aikau was never seen again. So that's kind of an interesting paradigm, actually, for what we're going to talk about, I think, because a lot of times if you have a user interface problem to solve, that can be a fairly terrifying prospect, right? Because there's a lot of different technologies involved. There's a lot of things that really go into making a good user interface. And so, you know, you can kind of take a little strength, I guess, from having this framework around, which is hopefully pretty easy to use. So the phrase that they use in Hawaii is Eddie would go, right? Like he would leave for help. And so perhaps the Aikau framework will help you as well. So let's talk a little bit about why you do some custom user interface development. Well, in my position, helping the partners, these are some things that people say to me. Well, people say, well, you know, Share would really be cool if there's just this thing, right? If there's just a way to do this one thing. Or they say, well, Share seems an awful lot like SharePoint, but it's not really like that when you start to get into the details. Or Share is way more than I want to expose my users to. I really want a much simpler interface to be able to use. Or people say, you know, I really like that work desk thing that you guys had. How come you guys got rid of that? And some people say, I'd like to have my user experience look exactly like this thing. Also, people say, I'm porting my product so that it'll work on Share, and how do I do that? Because a lot of that usually involves user interfaces. So all these types of things you can actually do with the Aikau framework, and so we'll talk about how you would do some of those things. Here's some examples of new Aikau interfaces that Dave Draper, who's in the back of the room there someplace, has built. So this is a replacement for the document library, and there's a couple of screenshots here so you can see kind of the different types of things you can use or do with Aikau. In the new version 5 of the code, several of the pages have been replaced with Aikau-based pages, including the search page, which is one of the things we'll focus on today. The document library itself has not been completely replaced. Some of the other components at the top of the pages, the menus and things, have been replaced. But the trend is that we're trying to replace all the components in the user interface with Aikau types of components. And you can see you can also do pop-ups and that type of thing. An interesting use case, actually, of the Aikau interface is this thing, which is a page designer, which is actually also built using Aikau components. And we'll talk a little bit about that, too. So to go over a little bit about where things are, I did a talk last year, and if some of this is going by pretty fast, have a look at that talk, because it's sort of a base type of discussion about Aikau. So last year at this time, we had a screen builder, and it looked like this. And you could enter in some JSON type of code, and it would display the resulting screen. Now the Aikau screen builder looks like this. So there's been quite a bit of work done to it by Dave. And there's a lot of tools on palettes now. You can actually customize this and configure it so that you can add your own widgets if you want to. And it generates a lot of code for you. To display an Aikau page, you give it a specific path, and it has this DPWS encoding in the URL. So there's a couple of different types of pages you can set up. You can set up a standalone page, which has just DP. You can have a hybrid page, which has the share, footer, and header included automatically, which is an HTTP path. Or you can also share pages directly from the repo. So you can put them right into the data dictionary inside of the repo and publish them from there as well. So to add an Aikau page to a site, you can hook it to an existing page, especially if it's an Aikau page. That's pretty easy to do. And I'll show an example of how to do that in a couple of minutes. You can pass the current context that you have to a new page, so you can build a completely new page and just pass it through HTTP parameters or whatever you want to do. Or you can make a new standalone page, and that configuration still works the same way, like if you're adding a wiki page to a site or that type of thing. So if you're familiar with how to do that and share, it's still the same. Now, in terms of resources that you can use to learn about Aikau, first of all, Dave has a really good set of blogs he publishes very frequently, and you can get them at, I think it's blogs.alfresco.com. There are summit videos from last year. Last year, like I said, is sort of a 100 level class. These classes this year are more like 200 level classes. Dave had a class yesterday, which unhappily I have not seen since I was doing a presentation at the same time. But what I was told was this class is sort of like an introductory class for what his class was, so unhappily we got those backwards. There's a really good tutorial online by Ole. Is Ole in the room? Great, thanks, dude. This is a super good resource. Goes through really in some good detail about how Dojo works and how it's used by Share and Surf. In addition, we have documentation now, and I'll show you some of that in a minute, but there is JavaDoc documentation for all of the framework components here. Or you can email me, and please do if you're doing a user interface project. We're really interested in hearing about that and getting some feedback to our engineers so that they can improve the product. Well, so how flexible is the Aikau framework really? So here's a video that I made of, why is my video thing not working? Okay. Of the widget resource library here. So this is actually the documentation for the library that I was just talking about. So if you go to this place here, which is developer.alfresco.com, you can see there's quite a bit of information on this page. And so what these are all discrete widgets that Dave has built and documented. So you can see there's like 100 or more of them there. And Dave's in the process of enhancing this documentation. It's a little bit, this is very eye-charty, I'm sure, for the people in the back of the room. But if you click on them, you'll get some information about what parameters you can set, as well as some of them will have some examples that you can use to set up some code. Down here towards the bottom, there are some services that are available that you can use to get data in and out of a page as well. So there's an example of one that has actually some example code there. And that's a reference to a service down at the bottom. Okay. So you can also add your own widgets to the Aikau framework, and you can do that using Dojo. So if you're familiar with Dojo, it's very easy to do. Dojo is used for a very specific reason, and I'll get into a little bit of that in a while. And Dave loves to talk about why he used Dojo, so you can corner him in the back. If you add a new widget, please think about open sourcing that or making it available commercially, because I'm sure other people might be interested in using those. You can also use Dojo widgets directly. So we've put covers over some of the Dojo widgets, and I'll show an example of how to use one of those later. I also showed an example on the talk that I gave last year of extending a different type of widget. But the other thing is you can configure in any JavaScript library. So if you like to use jQuery, if you like to use Angular, the framework is open and you can do that. So let us know what other types of things you would like to see. So in terms of styling and themes, the way that the code is set up, widgets can have an individual CSS file attached to them. So everything gets packaged as an atomic unit. You just add the CSS to the meta-inf directory with the widget. Now, in terms of theme support's pretty limited right now. The part of the problem is that the widgets all need a common naming convention to use in order for theming to work. And they haven't really got as far as focusing on that yet. But they are working on that. In terms of internationalization, you can internationalize your code with properties files, and then get all your code out of a message.get file with the properties. And that uses the same type of naming convention as Java. If you have a properties file that has a .fr, it is used when France is the default language. Okay. So to go back over just another little bit of how this works, Aikau depends on 4 basic files, and you only have to set up 3 of these. So you have to have a descriptor, you have to have a controller file, and you need to have a Freemarker template, and the Freemarker template is a specialized Freemarker template. And optionally, you can have a properties file to have message strings and that other type of stuff in there if you want to. All those files need to be in the same directory, and you can put them anywhere you want to under site web scripts. So the page descriptor basically just, it's like a descriptor that's always been around in Alfresco. It's not much of a file, but it tells Alfresco what the path to use for the code that you put in there is for. So in this particular case, this is the one for the page editor. The Freemarker template in every case for Aikau will look like this. It has a special directive called process JSON model. And the surf framework interprets that and unbundles all of the JSON to build out your page for you. And then the JavaScript controller looks like this. It's a hierarchical JSON structure. And the important parts there are just the names, basically, of the widgets. And you can see there's a couple that were in that set that I showed you a couple of minutes ago. instance on this page. So there's layout widgets, there's all kinds of different things, and you can hierarchically configure those to lay them out the way you want to. So in terms of setting up the page, you can either hand code the JSON. That's what we were doing last year until Dave had a really cool page builder set up. You can also programmatically generate the JSON. So that gives you an interesting thing to do. If you want to actually really dynamically generate a user interface, you can just write out some JSON, put the widgets and the definitions in there, and then feed those back into an Aikau page, and it will automatically build the page out for you. And you can also use the page creator tool. Like I say, the page creator is very functional. It's also configurable so that you can add your own widgets in. So currently, one thing to note is not all of the widgets that are in the source code are actually on the palette. So there's more widgets that are documented than you will see show up on the widget palette. In terms of the web scripts, you can set up your JSON any way you want to. And there's actually some really interesting examples if you look at the faceted search page, which is the production page that we have set up right now that uses Aikau. So that page actually has some intermixed JSON and JavaScript in it. Really does dynamically generate a page, and I'll show you that in a couple of minutes. And then, of course, you can add in any additional logic that you want in there, so just like I was just saying. All right, so how do you get data on a page? Well, the services are actually exposed as Aikau components. They're in the page builder tool palette, and you can also look at the faceted search page for an example of that as well. There's some special data widgets. One is called quads, which allows you to set up a data structure. So a lot of people used to use the other data structure thing that we had to set up different types of dynamic drop-downs and that type of thing. Now you can actually use this, which gets stored as JSON right in the data dictionary, and it's actually kind of a cool little feature that he built. And so there's a whole bunch of different types of uses for quads. In terms of event handling, the events are handled by a publish subscribe mechanism, which is why we use the Dojo framework. They'll bubble up through the DOM until it finds somebody that's subscribed for the event. And you can also limit the scope of that, of course. That's like a Dojo built-in thing. So you have some flexibility in how you handle that type of stuff. And the publications subscription is just by the name of what the event is, so it's pretty straightforward to use. You can also marshal data, and I'll show you an example of this as well, to send along with the event so that you can pass some things along that you would want to have. So now we're to the example part of the presentation, so here's where we're going to go. So the demonstration scenario is I'm a manufacturing company, got some technical support people, some CSRs and some support managers, and they handle problem reports, and I wanted to build a special search page for those guys. So I want to be able to tune the searches for different user types, and of course this needs to be done immediately. And so now I've got that sinking feeling that, boy, I've got some stuff to do and I'm not really sure exactly what to do. So the page that I'm going to use is the faceted search page. I don't know how many of you have seen the new faceted search page in version 5. So there's the faceting right there on the side. And so you can see up at the top by the URL path there that that's actually an Aikau page. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a toggle on the search page itself that'll toggle between the keyword search that's already there and a special search page that I'm going to build as a new form. And we'll put that onto the search page so that the guys that are the CSRs have a special search form to use. So in order to do this, what we're going to do is just define two files. There's just the module definition, which is just a very short file. It has just a couple of things in it that say what I'm defining and what I'm attaching that file to. And then the actual JavaScript file that has the page and form extension. So where those go, the module extension goes in Alfresco site data extensions, and the code goes in site web scripts under any path. So I'll put that under like com.acme or com.acme or something. And then you can deliver that as a jar, and that's what I'll be doing for most of the demonstration here. But if you're going to put this into development, of course, we recommend that you do that as an AMP because you can back those out and they're easier to maintain. So here's another video. This is a Windows development environment, as you can see. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a Eclipse editor. I'm sorry for the scrolling here, but that's just an artifact of the thing I was using to capture things. So the first thing I'm going to do, this is a demonstration of how to set up a Maven project, and we've had a couple of sessions here about how to use Maven. So I've done a new project there, and then I'm opening up the Maven project. When I get through the Maven project, there's a bunch of archetypes there. There's this is from the Alfresco public archetypes. There's also a set of enterprise archetypes. And there's a bunch of different archetypes there that you can use to build share projects, to build repo projects. Or there's one that I've used right here, which is called the All-in-One project, which has a repo and a share amp as well. So that's what you see over there. So if I expand the project that I made with the archetype, you can see there's a repo directory there, and there's also a share directory. And if I open up the share amp directory and start drilling into that, you can see that the directory that I need, the site web scripts and the site data, are set up underneath there. And there's actually an example module definition under there that you can use and build off of. So that's a good thing to start with. And then under the site web scripts, there's the rest of the files, the description, the JavaScript, and also the Freemarker template. So that's the description file. And then the Freemarker template is just the thing that has the processor directive. And then there's a basic setup for some JavaScript there that you can work off of. Okay, so the module extension file that you put in for the project that we're working on, so this is the thing that goes in the site data directory, has a couple of interesting parts of it. So this one is set up so that it will auto-deploy. As soon as this file is found by Alfresco, it will take the code that's referenced and it will automatically deploy it into the Alfresco stack. This one always passes evaluation. You can set these up so that there's an evaluator that you can use to determine whether it should be included in your stack or not. And then this is the part that specifies what I'm doing here. So the target is the faceted search page, and that's the path to the faceted search page. And then I'm telling it the source is going to come from that path there. So I'm just going to make up a path called Acme Customization Special Search. And that's where I'm going to put my source code. So adding the search button is like this. We'll take the faceted search page. We're going to put a link on the page right in this location. And that will be across from the existing menu selection that specifies whether you're pulling stuff out of the repository or a site. What we're going to do is identify where we're going to extend the code in the existing faceted search page, what additional new functionality we want to put in. Then we'll handle the toggle events, and there's some interesting things that Aikau has built in for that. And then we'll deploy it and watch what happens. So here's the administrator dashboard. So I'm going to go to the faceted search page. So I'll type in a keyword to search for. So here's the search page. You can see that it's an Aikau page there. It's got the DP thing in the URL. And then the page that I'm extending there is also part of the URL. So that's another thing you can use to search for things. And that's just a demonstration of how the faceting works there. So you can narrow the search using some of the keys on the side there. Now, I've gone to the Share index page here because there's a couple of things I want to show you. One thing is that there's families of web scripts here. The one that we'll be working in is Share. It doesn't really make any difference which particular one you want to put that in, but you can put them in any. Now, I just enabled SurfBug, and the interesting thing to see here is that normally SurfBug would outline areas of the screen for you, like it is on this page, so that you can find where a widget needs to go or what the name of the widget is. But since that page is completely dynamically built, SurfBug won't find that. Now, Dave has put in an extension that will let you do that with some Aikau developer tools now. That's a new thing that he's just put in. The other way to do that is what I'm doing right here, which is to do a search for the page that you're looking for. And so I've just drilled in there and found the faceted search page. And when you click on the ID here, you'll see a bunch of different information. So you can actually get to a bunch of information about an existing page as well as the code just by clicking through on the index page here. So it'll show you some information about the header that's on the page. And it'll also show you the descriptor that's defined for the page here. So that's what it's showing right now. It will show you the Freemarker template, which has just got the process JSON directive on it. And then it'll actually show you at the bottom here some of the code for the faceted search page itself. And you can see there's a considerable amount of code that's set up for the faceted search page. As soon as I catch up here. So there's a header and footer include there. That's a different way of doing the HTTP thing. All right, so now I'm going to scroll down through the code that's in the search page. There's a lot of code here that has to do with the faceting and permissions and all kinds of stuff here. Like I say, it's a pretty interesting example to look through if you're looking for examples of how to do different types of things. So what I'm looking for right now is that part of the page that has the menu bar that shows where the scope selection is. So I've just found it there. That's the label on the page that says search in, and then the repository is the other part of that definition. That's the menu bar right there. So the thing that I want to append to there is that ID. So I'm going to remember that ID, the top menu bar. All right, so I found the code that I'm going to append to. Now I'm going to start building out the code for the page itself. So this is a new page. This is the page that I'm putting in my site web script, so you can see the path up at the top. So I'm going to build a JavaScript object here called showAdvancedSearchLink. And that's the name of the widget that I'm using, the property link. Here's the label that'll be shown on the page, display the Acme case management search. And then there's a publish topic there, so that's actually publishing an event. And I'll show you where that event goes. And that's a payload that goes along with that published message. So I'll have something that's similar to that to hide the link. So there's another object that I built. And once again, that's a link. And it also publishes to the same topic with a different payload. So the top one had a thing that said show true, and this one says show false. So to add that to the page, what I do is I find the object using this widget utils function. and I'm searching on that ID that I just found a minute ago, the faceted search top menu bar. So that gives me a handle to the object on the page, and then I can splice things back onto that handle. So what I'm doing there is I'm adding those objects that I just defined that have a couple of different links on them to that part of the page. So now, this is the special Aikau visibility trick. So up at the top of the page, what I'm going to do, so there's the code that I just put in, the advanced search link. So I'm going to put some additional code up in here. And this code is sort of undocumented right now. It's a specialized handler, and we'll get some documentation set up for this. So basically what this does is it looks for that advanced search topic that got published. So it's a thing that subscribes to it and is actually able to toggle visibility of various components. And it's not very straightforward to understand just looking at it, but that's exactly what it does. So there's some pretty cool things built into Aikau that allow you to control different types of visibility on a page as well. So the other thing I'm doing there is setting it up so that when the menu is displayed, that the form that's there, there's just a text bar with a button that says search, will be hidden. So that's what that's doing. Okay, so now I've saved it. So here's my structure. Once again, here's the site data, site web scripts. So I've got a meta-inf directory there that I could use to put some CSS in, which I don't have anything in right now. And this must be like 1-point font, I'm sure. It's pretty small for me to see from here. So there's the JavaScript file that I just built. So now I'm going to jar that up. So I've made a jar file. And so there's my jar file. And so I'm going to take and deploy that into my Alfresco stack in the shared library directory. So that's not a recommended practice unless you're just doing development. So if you're doing deployment of an actual system, don't do that, or people will hate me for telling you to do that. Now, so here's what the resulting page looks like. So once again, I'm on my administrator dashboard page. I go to the search page. So now you can see there's a link off on the side there that says display the Acme meta page there. And when I click on it, you can see there that's the other form I was trying to hide when I click on it. So when I click on it, that form goes away. So my toggle is now set up. So I can toggle back and forth between the normal search page and my new search page. And that's all you need to do dynamic form extension. So it's pretty much that easy. Now, in terms of generating a new search interface, I use the page creator for that. So the page creator is at this location. This is built into version 5 of the software. It's not built into version 4.2, but you can get at it. We can tell you how to do that. And so you can see there's a bunch of palettes here that have different types of widgets on them. There's a pretty extensive palette for the document library. There's some layout widgets, and then there's also some form widgets. So I'm going to build out a page here, and you build it out just by dragging and dropping widgets onto the palette over here. And Dave's really improved how this works, so it's really pretty straightforward to figure out what you're doing. So I'm going to add a couple of text boxes. Things go onto the page in order, and one of the things that you can't do is reorder them very well. So I put a radio button on here, and then I decided I really wanted to put a select menu on first. So I had to back that out and put another one on. And then you can go into these individual things and start setting some of the attribution on them. So in this case, I'm going to set a label. I'm going to set the value of the tag that gets posted when the form is posted. And you can also set units. You can set a description of what that field is for. There's a bunch of other things that you can do on there to control visibility and that type of thing. And then there's a special naming convention that is used by the search software. So it's this thing here that says prop, and then it uses the namespace of the content model that you're using, as well as the attribute there. So that's how that gets set up. So here's an example here of setting up a different kind of widget. This is I think I'm setting up a drop-down here. It's one that has a multi-valued property. And so to do that, you can come down into this list and edit it. So there is a bug in the existing version of the page builder software that it does not display these things correctly during the preview that you'll see on this page here in a minute. But it does display them correctly when you actually set it out as a actual page definition. Okay, so you get the idea there. Now I'm going to do a preview. So this actually will show a preview of what that page looks like. So there's all my fields that I added to the page. And you can see the last couple of items there are not the values that I set up. But you can also use, this actually sort of shows another interesting thing, which is you can read them from other tables in the content store. Now the other thing that I just did there was I exported that definition out, and you can see at the bottom there it's generated the description, the JavaScript, and the FTL file for me. So if I look at the output that I got from that page creator output, you can see that I've got some JSON set up. It's put file IDs in for me if I need to use those that are unique. And then there's the actual definition of the widget that I put in, the text box widget. So it's generated a lot of code for me automatically. So to complete my search form, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the code that it generated, and I'm going to set up a framework to put that into. So remember, I wanted to have two cases there, one where I could have a CSR menu and one where I could have a manager menu. So there's the code that I just generated using the page creator. So if I go in there, you can see there's an array of widgets in there. And I can just grab that whole array into a copy buffer and then paste it back into my other page definition there. So that's what I'm going to do. You can see there's a bunch of kind of driftwood stuff that also gets generated here. You can get rid of this or you can keep it there. It doesn't really make any difference, but it kind of clutters up the code, so I removed it. So I'm going to paste that definition now into the JavaScript that I'm building. So I've got a couple of pastes. So that's the first part of it. The second part of it is here. So you can see it just generates some more JSON there. So I'm building out a JSON array. So now I'm building out a form to contain the selector, and that's what that part of it is doing. So that's just a select thing. And the options there you can see that uses the search option array that I just built out. So the final part of it is the form that actually posts the form to the selection interface. So it's got a topic that is being listened for by the rest of the search code there. And finally, I'm going to splice that back into the page as well. So that code is complete. So now when I run my page, now it looks like this. So once again, I've got my toggle button. So when I toggle my button, now you can see I've got a new form built out on my page. I've got several text boxes there and a drop-down that has the right values and a radio button that has the right values, as well as a selector right there that lets me switch contexts between users. So there's a bunch of different ways you could do this, and the CSS doesn't really look very good. It's just an example. But you can toggle back and forth, and so that's the completed page. So now we're done. So in the last couple of minutes, what I'm going to show you here is a custom widget definition that Dave Draper sent to me. So what this will do is add a slider widget on the search page that you can use to search by the file size. And the cool part of this is that it uses a jQuery slider. So he actually has the jQuery definition. You can use the Java query CSS libraries. So the way that you do that is, once again, you set up a module definition file. This one's called slider extension. So there's the definition for the where to attach it to on the faceted search page. And then the other part of that is the packages that are necessary to pull the jQuery stuff in. So that goes into the meta-inf directory that was there on the jar file. So that's how you attach in other types of JavaScript libraries. So it's really very straightforward. The JavaScript customization looks like this for the faceted search. So what it does is it's going to grab the widgets that's there, the search form, and it's going to replace it actually with the slider. So you won't see the search form there anymore. And it'll still post the same message. So the search, whoops, that didn't work right. There we go. So I'm going to go back to the search page here. And now you'll see that there's a slider there instead of the previous text box that was on that page. So you can grab the slider, and the slider is changing values there, so you can configure that through jQuery. And now I'm searching for files of various sizes, and when I get to 50 gigabytes, it comes up with some answers. So that's how that works. So it's pretty straightforward to incorporate other types of JavaScript libraries. So I think I'm almost out of time, or I may actually be over time. Does anybody have any questions real fast? Sure.
How about document file code? Is it supported?
It is. Dave, are you in the back there somewhere? Do you have a widget set up for that right now? For document file uploading?
There is a file upload widget, which is in 5 versions, which is used in production yet. If you look at the newer version of documents library, that uses it. So yeah, there's an upload thing there. And it's, again, unlike the ones currently used in the document library, it's written so that you can easily extend it. For example, people want to do things like, well, after you've uploaded, changing types, changing the metadata, things like that. So although it doesn't provide that out of the box, it's written in such a way that you could then make changes to the files after uploading. So yeah, there is a way.
Yeah, there's a very extensive set of functionality that's there. You can look at the source code in Subversion, or like I say, a lot of it's documented in the document page that I showed you there. Anybody else? Sure.
Is it any possibility to make hybrid pages that use both old-fashioned FTLs and with some Aikau widgets inside?
You want to take that one, Dave? I don't know the answer to that one, actually. Okay, the question is, can you make a hybrid page that uses code from an older share page along with Aikau widgets?
Yes, a good example of that is the dashboard. Some of the analytics dashlets that I think they had shown yesterday, they're written using Aikau.
Yeah.
They're written then dropped straight into the existing page. So when you actually look at the dashboard, it's like dashboard with the analytics dashlets in. It's a mixture of the Aikau header, Aikau dashlets, and old UE style dashlets mixed in together. So it's totally possible.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? All right. Well, thank you very much for attending. I really appreciate it. If you could fill out some of the surveys in the back. The organizers like to have those done. And Dave Draper, who's standing up in the back there, is the godfather of surf and share. He's the guy with all the knowledge in the planet about that stuff. So once again, thanks for coming.